that this was submitted to us, and initially that some of the information that was previously discussed during the public portion, the staff were not aware of in terms of the task force procedural process. So clearly this made it to the Planning Commission last time, and it did not move forward as it was not complete, or we did not have Chapter 11 of the comprehensive plan at that time. We will say, now that we've had a chance to review Chapter 11 of the comprehensive plan, everything we're going to go over today is specifically for advisory comment only. This was not submitted to us for GML 239 approval from the Suffolk County Planning Commission at this time. It should also be noted that prior to once the task force completes their process, the town will be required to submit the final draft of the plan to the Suffolk County Planning Commission for review and action pursuant to that GML 239. And the Planning Commission will have a right to comment on anything specific to that referral at that time. Next slide, please. I kind of just mentioned this, but just a little background on how we ended up here today. So again, maybe a little miscommunication, and it was submitted, and staff were under the impression that this was submitted to us for action, but again, it was determined that it was submitted to us just for advisory comment, and again, the referral that was submitted to us didn't include Chapter 11 of the draft plan, so it was determined at the last Planning Commission meeting on November 1st by the Planning Commissioners that we wouldn't move forward on this until the staff had adequate time to review and analyze all 11 chapters, and that this would be brought back up to today's meeting on 12/6. So then it was deemed incomplete without prejudice, and so again, the following analysis and comments reflect staff's review of chapters 1 through 11 of the comp plan. Next slide, please. So I'm sure everybody is familiar, but just this is a nice map that our cartographic unit put together for us. And so this shows Shelter Island, and as noted in Chapter 3 of the draft plan, total land area of Shelter Island is approximately 7,188 acres. Next slide. This map shows land use as of 2016, and as discussed in Chapter 3 of the draft plan, majority of Shelter Island is composed of recreational and open space at 44%, and also low density residential at 42%. And then the next jump is to 9% is vacant. Next slide. I'm assuming everybody has read the staff report, but like Commissioner Kaufman had noted, I'm not sure how many people have had a chance to read the entire Shelter Island comp plan. So I took some screen caps out of this just so that you could have a visual of what we're looking at. So these are pages out of the comp plan where the initial task force, I believe, had reached out to the public and developed vision and guiding principles for the town's comprehensive plan update. Adopting, the vision states the reasons for adopting and developing a comprehensive plan, and then the guiding principles are the principles that they follow when developing the recommendations. Next slide, please. This is another screen cap, and this is actually a screen cap from the Town of Shelter Island's website, where each chapter, it's not one large document or PDF. Each chapter is an individual link to a different PDF. Again, it has 11 chapters, and then also it has 11 separate links to different previous studies or reports that have been conducted that are included as part of the appendix. Staff had some additional general comments. We're going to get into the more substantive ones, but in terms of just general ease of review, the town is encouraged to include a table of contents, maybe something similar to what is posted on the website, just so that when you're going through it, you know what pages are respective of certain chapters or appendices. Also, I know, again, this is a super draft plan, but again, as the public and or others have been reviewing it, it's a little confusing when some of the tables are not in the plan or are mislabeled or they're referenced on the wrong page. So again, you're reading the plan and you want to make sure that you're looking at the correct table. Also, this is something that's going to come up a little bit later, but in the recommendation section in chapter 11, recommendations previously discussed in chapters 4 through 10 are numbered but not alphabetized as they are later, so it might help when you're at the back of the plan and you want to go back to the original chapters. 1, to have a table of contents, and 2, also to label them consistently so that when you're going back and forth, you don't have to sit there labeling them yourselves. Next slide. So just to reiterate, similar to the last staff report, the staff report is an addendum, so it includes additional comments, but the Suffolk County Planning Commission staff does recognize that the draft plan includes discussion on all 6 of the Suffolk County Planning Commission's critical countywide priorities. It should be noted that the Suffolk County Planning Commission guidebook has a continuous underlying theme, which is emphasized in section 4.7 under specific environmental policies that encourages the guiding principles to promote development where it's deemed appropriate in downtown hamlet centers adjacent to transportation and retail services, and discourages development where it is deemed inappropriate within coastal zones, environmentally sensitive areas, unique ecological habitats, and designated open spaces. Additionally, preservation and protection of the region's natural resources, which includes but is not limited to groundwater, surface waters, tidal and freshwater wetlands, dunes, steep slopes, and bluffs, are also strongly emphasized. Next slide. So going through this, again, these are staff's advisory comments on these chapters 4 through 7 as discussed in the staff report. Chapter 4 deals with housing. I will note that chapter 1, 2, and 3 don't include any specific recommendations. It's more background information. Chapter 4 through 10 and 11, chapters 4 through 11 actually include recommendations. So if you're wondering what happened to chapters 2 and 3, that's why we're not going over those. There are no specific recommendations. Chapter 4 deals with housing. Staff has encouraged the town to embrace the best management practices in which development densities are limited by environmental capacities. Town is further encouraged to initiate transfer of development rights program by which any increases in density could be tied to the purchase and or transfer of development rights, or to a 1-for-1 density offset through upzoning of vacant privately owned land. It is further noted that in addition to creating more affordable housing options, attention should be given to creating housing that works for special needs populations. The town may accomplish this by including universal design principles into plan. Chapter 5 deals with the economy and includes a recommendation for the town to consider the leasing of municipally owned underwater properties for aquaculture. Specifically, Goal 5-4 states that underwater lands could be publicly owned, parenthesis, town, county, or state, or could be in a partnership with a private owner. Town may want to look into this. It seems unlikely that the town would have the authority to lease underwater lands owned by the state or the county. So potentially, again, they're encouraged to review this section for accuracy and revise as needed. Similarly, Goal 8-2 in Chapter 8, Parks, Open Space, and Waterways makes a similar statement recommendation that should also be reviewed in tandem with this recommendation. Chapter 6 deals with transportation. The town is encouraged to expand recommendations to transportation policies specified in the Suffolk County Planning Commission guidebook, such as development designs that include networks for pedestrian and bicyclists with shortcuts and alternative routes to travel along high-volume streets. Development design should also include an internal network, if possible, with multiple connections to adjacent land uses without the necessity to enter onto major traffic arteries. And then Chapter 7 deals with natural resources and water quality. It is the belief of the Suffolk County Planning Commission staff that more effort can be made towards advancing the use of natural vegetation and green methodologies. The town is encouraged to review the Suffolk County Planning Commission publication, Managing Stormwater Natural Vegetation and Green Methodologies, and incorporate into the proposal where practical design elements contained therein. Recommendations in Chapter 7 also address irrigation and discharge of water, but does not include discussion regarding maintenance of residents' private pools as it relates to usage and disposal, even though there are sections within the town code and other reports that are included in the appendices that do discuss this. So it's recommended that that be explored and maybe added to recommendations in Chapter 7. Staff also encouraged the town to review and improve the goals and recommendations included in 7-5 to not only strengthen the town's regulations to protect groundwater and prevent contamination, but to also strengthen the town's authority to enforce said regulations. Next slide. Just to break this up again, this is now we're moving forward into additional comments on recommendations made in chapters 10, 2, and 11. Chapter 10 dealt with utility, sustainability, and resilience. It is the belief of the Suffolk County Planning Commission staff that additional emphasis should be placed on renewable energy and energy efficiency, i.e. orientation of new buildings, use of rooftop solar or other solar devices, wind turbines, building materials and requirements, etc. for appropriate scale energy efficiencies. Chapter 10 of the Shelter Island Comprehensive Plan update would also be strengthened by inclusion of renewable energy and energy efficiency policies. The Suffolk County Planning Commission has published guidelines on renewable energy and energy efficiency, which can be found on the Suffolk County Planning Commission website. While Chapter 2 of the Comprehensive Plan doesn't include any specific recommendations, this one, Chapter 2, is entitled Growth, Change, and Demographics, and examines the past and present demographic characteristics and socioeconomics of Shelter Island. Additional attention could be made to equity and sustainability. Suffolk County Planning Commission staff recognize the interdependence between environment, the economy, and social equity. Best management practices specific to equity and sustainability to promote equal access to economic, environmental, and social opportunities, as well as promoting equity and distribution of societal burdens and potential land use impacts should be considered. Next slide, please. So now we're jumping into Chapter 11, and this chapter is where everything kind of gets tied together, and it's entitled Future Land Use Plan and Action Agenda. The town is encouraged to revise the document and verify, or not revise, that's a typo, review the document and verify that terminology is used consistently throughout the draft plan, but specifically in Chapter 11. For example, there's a section in this chapter entitled Implementation Tools, and the subsequent paragraph includes discussion of 6 critical methods that the town intends to follow to implement the plan. It gets a little bit confusing for the reviewer, so it might be easier or clearer if the terms tool and method were not used interchangeably. And maybe the tools and methods, because if you're reading the list, some of the items in the list seem like tools and others seem like methods, so maybe they could be separated and better improved the description to describe the proposed path forward for implementation. Also, the town may want to consider revising discussion of the action agenda, implementation matrix, and implementation schedule that is located on page 3 of Chapter 11. Maybe a little bit of expansion on the explanation of the differences between these terms and how each of them contribute to the implementation of the comprehensive plan update, because again, it gets a little jumbled. Next slide, please. So this is another map that was put together by our cartographic. As noted in chapter, or as noted in the section 133 of the town code, there are 6 zoning districts in Shelter Island, and and section 133-12 of the code establishes a nearshore and peninsula overlay district. It was interesting in reviewing the comp plan update and understanding that it is still in draft form, that while the town provides a list of zoning recommendations in chapter 11, which also identifies where within the plan the goal and recommendations are discussed at length in previous chapters, there do not appear to be any examples or any specific zoning amendments or proposed zoning map that would show where these potential changes from a holistic standpoint would take place. Likewise, the draft plan does not include any specific land use recommendations or a recommended land use map. Next slide, please. This may have been helpful, a previous slide up. So this is a screen cap from chapter 11 showing the list of recommendations that deal with zoning. That's what that previous paragraph discussed. So though it is noted that the table is meant to serve as a guide, this table that you're looking at right now is meant to serve as a guide to identify where specific zoning recommendations are located within the document. This list appears to include not only potential zoning recommendations, but also policy changes. And then what was also a little odd was that while some of them are zoning recommendations, as noted by the previous paragraph, some of them are policy changes, but not all the policy changes that were previously discussed in other chapters were included in this list, while some and others were. So some clarification or fine-tuning of that may be helpful. Next slide. Thank you. These again are screen caps of pages from chapter 11, just to give you an idea. So the town refers to, as noted in the title of this chapter, future land use plan and action agenda. They identify difficulty, I guess, in implementation. And again, it would be helpful, and this is kind of goes back to the comment of consistency of terminology or use of terminology in terms of, the action agenda page. It appears recommendation and action items are also used interchangeably. I'm not sure if this is the town's intention. So some clarification there would be helpful. And then as you can see here, as I previously noted earlier, if you look on the right side of the screen, this is a page with recommendations. So after the list of zoning recommendations, it's broken down and segmented by chapters and then specific recommendations, and then identifies type of action, who would be the action, and then partners for the action, and then identifies difficulty for implementing the action. And so it has the letters here, but again, so that's where the comment comes in that previous chapter, they're not labeled with letters, but in this part of it, they are labeled with numbers and letters. And so just consistency for review purposes would be helpful. Next slide. Thank you. So with all of that said, not to dismiss any of the work that the town has done, to date. It does, if you've gone through and read the plan and also looked into the appendices, some are a bit older than others, but you can see that a significant amount of work in planning had preceded the development of the comprehensive plan update that we are looking at currently. Such initiatives include the following, which are listed in blue on the left side of your screen, and again are the 11 reports and appendices included in the document and also available on the town's website. The only other thing that I would say in terms of reviewing and looking into some of the more recent reports and plans, you know, these studies and reports that were included in the appendix also have recommended actions and may also include a strategy for implementation. What would be helpful is if the draft comprehensive plan, in referencing some of these reports, also then identified which, if any, of the recommendations of these appendix report studies included have been implemented, completed, or just kind of a general status update on the same, just to know where you are. Because if you go back, Mike, to the previous slide, just as an example, you have here at the top, I'm sorry, you can't read it, but it talks about continue to implement the ground and surface water management plan, but it talks about difficulty, but it doesn't really tell you where they are. It says continue, but a status update as to where they are in the process, what they've accomplished to date, some kind of matrix to explain that might be helpful as well. So again, you know, it would be helpful to identify which, if any, of the recommendations, you know, the status of the same. Next slide, please. Last slide. Lastly, this kind of becomes like a coverall because some of the other comments might be covered by this, but you know, as discussed during the public portion, pursuant to SECRA regulations, you know, the adoption of a comp plan is subject to state environmental SECRA. Specifically, the New York State DEC SECRA handbook states that a municipality's adoption of land use or a comprehensive plan is not only subject to SECRA, but is classified as a type 1 action in the SECRA regulations. The generic EIS is specifically designed to analyze actions that call for a series of subsequent actions, such as in a comprehensive plan. And, you know, in reviewing the SECRA handbook, it will also make note that an advantage of completing a generic EIS is that if a generic EIS has been prepared, no further SECRA compliance is required if a subsequent proposed action is carried out in conformance with the conditions and thresholds established for such actions in the generic EIS or its finding statements. It was already discussed, but we'll just note it again. You know, while it's possible to issue a neg deck for the adoption of a comp plan, a generic EIS is the most appropriate way to analyze the impacts of a comprehensive plan. Therefore, it is the recommendation of the staff that the town complete a full EIS, a full environmental assessment form to identify and consider the potential environmental impacts associated with the adoption of the comprehensive plan. And that wraps up staff review, staff's advisory comments on the draft Shelter Island Comprehensive Plan update.
Thank you so much for all your work on this. I know Shelter Island appreciates it, and we all appreciate the work staff put into this. I'll turn this over to Elizabeth Gall from Shelter Island.
Yeah, thank you so much. You did a great job with this. You hit all of the points that when I read the report last month, the plan last month, that you hit all of the marks. So we approved this. So what is this anyway? We're not really approving the plan. We're just
we're approving the comments to be forwarded to them, because this is not an adoption, but rather comments that we're approving to be sent to Shelter Island to incorporate. It's not the final report; It's just the draft. So we'll be voting to adopt the staff's comments.
Yep. So I'm voting to adopt the staff's comments. I think you did a great job. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anybody with any comments?
Yeah, this is Kaufman, if I may, for a
Yep.
moment. Okay, first off, staff is to be congratulated on really going into this in depth. I thought it was a very, very good job that they did. I also have some additional comments that I'm not going to put into the record today because I didn't submit them quickly enough for staff to look at. But I do have extensive comments out there about aquifers, wetland buffers, IA systems, dredging, some of the docs and also the EIS procedures. How would I transmit those unofficial comments to the town if it's appropriate to do?
I think that's a question that we have to ask legal. Is our counsel on the call?
I'm
Yes,
under the
hi, I'm
thinking-
here.
Hi, Jackie.
What,
Can you
so
respond
what's
to
the actual,
Commissioner Kaufman's question, please?
he wants to know if it's appropriate to personally submit comments aside from commission comments? Is that the
Yes.
question?
I believe so. Mike, is that your question?
Yes.
I believe that the public portion of the comments is closed for this
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, I thank you, Elizabeth. I just want counsel to counsel Commissioner Kaufman.
I mean, if he wants to as a person, personally, you're always allowed to comment the way the public, you're still a member of the public. So whatever is open still for the public, you would be allowed to, but you should disclose your role also as a commissioner, but that you're commenting in your personal role. That would
Okay.
be.
Okay, that's the way I'll do it.
Commissioner Finn?
You know, we often see, you know, townships on the East End come forward with plans, and more often than not, moratoriums, as we saw earlier today. But there's little or no mention for affordability, and you know, each one of these townships out there, you know, we've done hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to preserve open space, and some monumental purchases out out in the township on all of East End. But there's little or no mention for affordability, and what I'd like to see here is a comprehensive plan that addresses the last 5 years of affordable units that were delivered in the township, which I can probably count on one hand. And what's the goal of how many units they want to achieve through the next 10 to 15 years, with having an affordability component tied to medium income, like most of the rest of the island and the state is very mindful and very conscientious to deliver, because as part of our mandate is to deliver housing stock and housing types for all of Long Islanders, and not just the median housing price of $5 to $7 million.
Commissioner Finn, can you give us language to add as another comment to be added to this?
Well, I think it should just be about what type of housing stock has been delivered, and what is the goal and numbers of the number of affordable housing units in the next 5 to 10 years that the town wants to deliver to its housing inventory.
Staff, is that adequate for you for language for an additional comment? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you have any issues with that? Because I know you made the motion to adopt.
No, I think that's fine.
Great. Anybody else with any other additional comments? Okay, I believe we have, Yep.
I have one comment. I mean, it's unclear
Yes.
to me how additional housing stock is going to lead to affordability. You know, so I mean, we could leave the comment in there. I don't think that's, you know, directly related.
we can craft the language to talk about that portion of it, John. Commissioner Finn, do you want to add anything else to the language so it points to that more succinctly?
Well, to put it in context of farm tractors, if there's one farm tractor to farm all of the East End, farm tractors are going to be very expensive and thus unaffordable. So how many farm tractors does the town plan on supplying in the next 5 to 10 years to make it more affordable?
I mean, in that example, a tractor is always going to cost the same amount of money, so it's just lost on me, that analogy.
I think to add some stuff to the language to discuss that, you know, maybe point out that the issue of affordable housing is a big concern of the counties, and we'd like their plan to address the ways of addressing that issue. The challenges of different housing stock or something to that. John, is that something that would help as well?
Well, it just always you don't have that social stratification in housing stock in some of these areas through preservation and just by virtue of where they are.
Well, we can put
So
workforce housing in there. I mean, because we all know that the entry level now for a house in Shelter Island is almost $1 million. So I think putting something in there that there is a need for workforce housing in order to have workers to work in the stores that are on Shelter Island and for other people that can't afford $1 million. So I think we need language to that effect that, you know, Shelter Island should not only be for people that can afford over $1 million housing.
I mean, it, Chairwoman?
Yep.
I don't know if the town wants to jump in on this. I mean, the town does have a section on housing that does discuss affordability, and it notes that there's that drastic jump in terms of affordable housing, and they do have some ideas, but what is lacking is proposed amendments to zoning that would make that happen. So again, I don't know if the town wants to jump in on this, and again, maybe in terms of the wording that we can put together and we'll send out for review, that we put affordable units, not just increase in, units, but affordable units.
May I jump in?
Yes, you may.
This is BJ Yanfola, Task Force. I'm on mute?
No,
I'm
we
not.
can hear you.
You can hear me, yep.
Yep.
About the housing specifically, the housing plan that we adopted in January is part of this comprehensive plan. And the housing plan discusses specific goals over the next 0 to 5 to 10 years for adding affordable housing. And it discusses, in terms of town generated housing. So the town to construct rental units for affordable housing to the best of our ability. And we are constrained a bit on Shelter Island because we don't have centralized water and sewer. And so there is only so much we can do density-wise. But we do have 3 properties that the Community Housing Board currently is preparing RFP to go out and build 10 units. And so, you know, the hope is within the next 3 years, we have now the money from the new transfer tax to get those units built. That's number one. Number two, we do discuss ADUs in the comprehensive plan. I agree, it's a little cursory because the town has already changed, or let me rephrase that. Changed the regulation of rental laws so that accessory dwelling units may only now be rented on an annual basis. So no more for short-term rentals, no more for Airbnb. And then the third piece there with the ADUs is we did get $2 million from CDC-LI to grant to 11 homeowners, monies to build ADUs, build or reconfigure already existing structures into ADUs. And that would be strictly, have to meet the affordability guidelines and would have to also be year-round. So I'm sensitive to what you're saying about housing. I think, if you don't mind me saying, we should strengthen the availability or including housing that will be addressing the disabled population, including seniors as they age and become infirm. One of our things with community housing, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here. I don't want to waste your time. I know you have a hard stop. But however, the community housing, they're going to we're looking at build to rent. Almost all of the aspects of a build to rent structure, wider hallways, closets, etc., are ADA compliant. And so, I apologize for having omitted it. And I hate to say this, but it felt obvious to us. And so that anything we would build would be ADA compliant, but that is the wrong, obviously. It should be there and it should be explicit.
Okay. And as well as inclusive housing, that's another thing that we've been harping on a lot with the just, not just 65 and over, but also inclusive housing is very important as well.
Yes, absolutely. Want to talk about TDRs?
And
if we
we
may?
appreciate your recommendation to create a TDR program. The town actually attempted to do that last year, the year before, and we got pretty far along into the process, and then we were told by Suffolk County Department of Health that we could not have a TDR program because we do not have municipal water and wastewater. So we didn't meet that qualification. So that is why we left TDRs out of the plan, because at this time we know that they are not feasible. We did try recently. In the future, should we get public water and public sewer in certain parts of the island, we may be able to develop a TDR program. But we were rejected from that when we attempted to do it.
Thank you for that information.
Yes.
So let's go back. Commissioner Finn, do you want additional language based upon what the town has shared with us, or do you want, what would you like?
No, I just wanted, my feeling was just to have a comment about just the number, sheer numbers. What are the goals? Because listen, as we know from a planning perspective, affordable housing is a euphemism for most part, because without any context and numbers, it's hard to. Everybody wants affordable housing, just like everybody wants clean water. It's just how many units are part of this comprehensive plan in the next 5 to 10 years. So they said they have 10 units that they're working, which 10 units may not sound a lot, but that's probably 10 more than they delivered in the last 10 years. But so that's
Yeah,
it's,
so I think that's
so-
something
yeah.
that they agree. You know, I think maybe we can put a comment in there that the staff can work on. But what I'm hearing from the town is that they're aware of that. It just wasn't included in everything, but that they're aware of that issue, and that would be something that they would include. And this is just comments. Also, I just want to remind everybody that the final draft will be coming back to us at a future date once they wrap that up, because they're still getting everything together. And I think the town understands that that's a concern of ours. Do any of the other commission members have any questions, comments? Elizabeth, do you want to make the motion? Maybe we'll just add another comment just about the affordability and the number of units, and staff can craft something I'm sure will suffice, and
I'll make a motion to refer the comments that are made by the Suffolk County Planning Commission to Shelter Island, along with an additional note about the number of deliverable houses in the housing stock. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's adopt the comments to be forwarded to the town, including the housing.
Housing stock.
I think that's good. And do we have a second?
Second, Kaufman.
Thank you. Christine, can you please take a vote?
Sure. Stephanie Baldwin,
Yes.
Jennifer Casey,
Yes.
John Kinsella,
No.
David Doty,
Yes.
John Finn,
Yes.
Elizabeth Galley,
Yes.
Michael Kaufman,
Yes.
Errol Kipp,
Yes.
Lashika Lewis,
Yes.
Tom McCarthy,
Yes.
Tim McCarthy,
Yes.
and Lisa Perry.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. I believe we're going to go next on to the Suffolk County Planning Commission guidebook revisions, as we have to vote on that, and then we're going to do the IMA. Is that correct, staff?
Yes, we'd like to go for the
Guidebook
guidelines.
first?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.